Hi. Today, again, it's what I want to talk to you about could be applied to quite experienced users or to people who are relatively new. And like most of the new to NVivo, but like most of the videos that we produce, it isn't just about the functionality of the software, it's how you might apply that in an academic or publishing setting. So, qualitative research in that kind of a disciplined environment. And what I want to talk to you about today is essentially the capturing of soft data. Because soft data is very important data. And it's even more important if you can integrate that in a meaningful way into your data. So things like field notes and observations, coding assumptions, thoughts and ideas, diaries, don't sit in a drawer somewhere in a completely different environment, say in hard copy, to your transcripts, which might be in something like NVivo. So the idea of integration of that qualitative data is extremely important. Soft data is almost always important, especially in primary research studies. So imagine you've come to interview me and I'm depressed. I haven't, I've just been diagnosed with something. You open the door, I haven't shaved, you come into my home, there's 3 days dishes on the table. There's a context going on here which is about to impact on the entire interview. So the term NVivo, what the software is named after, is a Latin medical term, which, if I translate it, literally means working on live tissue. But figuratively, it means seeing something as part of a living organism affected by the body at large. In other words, context is everything in the qualitative paradigm. Everything in this world is time and context bound. And what are we doing when we're coding data? We're taking things out of context. We're in the soundbite business. Let's say I'm your reviewer, your external, your PI. I might think, well, how do I know you're not on a crusade? Something's been bugging you for years and now you're going to tell us all how to fix it. You can ask as many leading questions as you like in an interview. You can be as selective as you like in the encoding process. You can probably find quotes in your interviews to support your argument. I could probably find quotes in your data to support my argument. So how do you address researcher bias? I'm using that term deliberately incorrectly in the context of qualitative studies. So when people talk about bias, it usually has a wider meaning. So the difference between the positivist paradigm, like the sciences, like quantitative research or scientific experiments, is that they're objective in the sense that you have results. In the qualitative paradigm, they're not. It's that they're subjective. They are. This is co-creation. You're influencing the research, and it's influencing you. You're learning from each other, from your participants, for example. So we don't talk about results. We talk about findings, like a judge would make, having weighed up all of the evidence, and often conflicting evidence. So context is everything in this paradigm. And when I talk about bias, it doesn't mean that we're not going to be true to our participants. We certainly are. We don't want to impose our worldview over theirs. It's their worldview we want to represent. So that doesn't mean, because we're not biased in the classic sense, that this is co-creation. It doesn't mean that you're untrue to your participants or using their voice to further your argument. You can have your voice in the discussion, but for the findings, we want to truly represent the participant. And there are three tools, both in literature and in NVivo, for addressing this absence of what's often critical and soft data. Think about, for example, how much data is lost in the transcribing process. I love my boss might get miscoded to he loves his boss, when the meaning is he hates his boss. So we're not coding for words, we're coding for meaning. So how something was said can completely alter the meaning of what was said, completely invisible in the transcript. The grass is getting long could mean it's time to cut the grass. It could mean spring is on the way. It depends what we were talking about 30 seconds earlier, 3 seconds earlier, because we're lifting things out of context. So the capturing of context, if you look at the literature going back into the 40s before there was ever technology, those books only talk about 3 processes: indexing, annotating, and memoing. Now, indexing is coding, and we have several comprehensive videos on coding. I'll put a link to them down below. Today we're not looking at coding, we're looking at the other 2, annotations and memos, as a way of capturing and integrating soft data. So we're going to use the standard tutorial in version 14. We can make a copy of this available if you want it. But this is the standard one you have. It's been adapted for reflexive thematic analysis, because that's a different video. And again, we'll give you a link to that down below if you want it, how you might apply that in NVivo. But it's fine for our purposes for today, so we're going to use that. It's Windows, and it would look very similar on the Mac. And 2 of the functions we're going to look at today, memos and annotations, are exactly the same in Windows and Mac, so it would apply equally in both. The third, the see also link, whereas the concept applies on Mac, the tool isn't in the Mac version, at least as of yet. So you would have to, so that one isn't available for Mac users as of now. So the 3 tools that you need to get to know from the get-go, if you want to demonstrate rigor and show how you were true to participants and you captured context, would be down here in the notes area. They would be memos, annotations, and see also links. All very useful tools for this purpose. So I'm going to start with a memo. A memo is a document that I can create in NVivo, like a Word document. So I'm going to just close this message that appears on empty folders telling me what a memo is. It's helpful when you're learning. I'm going to make a new memo. I'll just call it test so we know this is just us. And if I say OK, I get my document. Might be a project journal. So essentially I can have a memo that's standalone. It's not linked to any particular item. So my project journal, perhaps, or my analytical strategy, notes, things that are about the entire project, my timelines, my Gantt charts for timelines for stages and processes and all of that. That would be in a standalone memo. But I can also link a memo to an item. We'll show you that in a minute. So it's just like a word processor. If I click into the edit button here, you can see it. It's Microsoft Word, essentially. If I do Control, Shift, and T, I get a date and timestamp entry, because we would always recommend people use project journals to capture the thoughts and ideas and processes and document them as they go through. So this memo can be created. If you don't like the word processor in NVivo, you could always do this in Word and simply drag the memo into NVivo, and that would work as well. The second type of memo is a linked one. So if I go up here to Barbara's interview, you can see that this won't require a lot of technical inputs, any of the things we're going to show you today, because they're not technically difficult. It's just understanding them and really their importance to qualitative data analysis. So there's Barbara's interview. Now, you can see this little icon here that tells me Barbara has a linked memo. So I can open up Barbara and/or the memo. So I'm going to open up Barbara first, and that'll open up her interview. And then I'm going to open up the memo. Now I could do that by right-clicking on Barbara and saying Memo Link, Open Linked Memo. And there are good key commands for anybody who likes to use key shortcuts. I do myself. So Control, Shift, and M will also pop any memo that's linked to Barbara. Now in this case, it's a summary of her interview. So as I'm coding through Barbara, this wider context is flashing at me. I'm going to get brownie points for having this in my audit trail. I'm just going to switch off those 2 items there for a minute, just to we come to them. But there's Barbara and there's her notes. And as I'm coding Barbara and attaching meaning to her words, there's an icon flashing me here showing me there's a wider context, like in my example earlier. This person is looking through the lens of anger or shock or depression, and I need to factor that in when I'm attaching meaning to his words, doing that double hermeneutics thing. I think this is what she thinks. So, so the memo can be standalone or it can be linked to an item. And finally, later on, when I'm in my analysis, there's community change, one of my sub-themes under the broader community theme. And it has, again, a linked memo. Now, I won't bother opening up the community change, but what I can see is if I pop the memo, Control Shift and M, that's a summary of what people said about community change. So I can start to build findings, ask questions, systematically review my themes, write about them, ask questions of them, and start to draft preliminary findings using analytical memos, which is phase 6 of Brown and Clark thematic analysis, the particular method that we're showing you today, but it could be any method. Almost all of them involve memos. Memos are widely used. It's no coincidence that the first stage of reflexive thematic analysis, which is a very widely used method, is initial coding and noting. IPA, generating, the initial coding and noting is IPA. Familiarization and writing familiarization notes is Brown and Clark. But a lot of methods will use annotations and memos liberally as a way of controlling and managing this softer data. So that's the first of 3 types of documents that are easy to use in NVivo, but help you to organize your data very efficiently and retrieve it very efficiently. Also demonstrates good practice in your processes, which informs your audit trail, and we have a separate video on that. We'll put the link below for that one as well, in case you want it. The second type of a document is an annotation. So annotations are, a memo will be about Barbara's entire interview, a summary of it, and the circumstances in which we found her. An annotation would be a bit like a comment in Word or in a PDF. It's specific to a particular comment in the interview, not the whole interview. Now from here I can see in the annotations screen that Barbara has 3 annotations, and I can drill down on any of those by just opening up Barbara, and it'll take me to the part of her interview that was annotated, and it will show me the note that was linked to it as well at the bottom of the page here. And this actually, although they're side by side, is 2 separate annotations. You keep your eye on that content screen down the bottom. When I move the mouse from here into any of those blue areas, you'll see that note is changing. So I don't have to scroll, the note will be displayed. So when you hear I see blue highlighted text, there's my note in this case. So these are very useful for field notes and observations, coding assumptions, qualifying why you're coding something there. This person was being sarcastic, he doesn't really love his boss. Or researchers' thoughts and ideas, could it be kind of moments that you'll forget later on when you're summarizing the content of a code and you see that out of context. Adding an annotation is a simple process. You simply highlight the passage of text you want to annotate. It could be a word, could be an entire paragraph. You right click and you make a new annotation. And you type your note. The 2 things you're likely to be asked for by a PI, a supervisor, a reviewer, are an example of a transcript coded, not a reviewer obviously, because that would be confidential data, but a supervisor or a PI in an institution might ask you. An example of a transcript coded, or the coding structure that you've generated in the round. If I wanted to show how I've coded this and I want to include my annotations, I would first switch on my coding stripes. Now there's a whole other video on coding stripes and highlighters, and see also links, but I just put it on for everything. You could filter this to a certain stage of the process. So I get these colored stripes on the side, and there's all my different codes, And if I click on a green stripe, it'll highlight anywhere in that document in green that's coded there. But more importantly, I want to send this now to a colleague, to a supervisor. I want to show how I've coded Barbara. So if I do print, and I'm just going to preview this so you can see, I can include my annotations. I can also include see also links, which we're coming to. That'll be connections to things like literature and policy, relationships, and any links to memos. I can actually put the memo links in there. So I can show not only how I coded Barbara, but I can show the work that's gone around the case as well. So there's Barbara. And if I go on down to the annotations, you'll see that there's numbers now, a little 1 and a 2 there, beside the notes. And the code stripes are opposite. The codes that I've applied this text to are opposite on the right. Set as a separate video for coding stripes. We won't go down that road today. But I can see also, not only can she see how I coded Barbara, she can see what I was thinking when I was coding Barbara. Because there's all my notes embedded with hyperlinks back up to the various parts of the transcript. So annotations are really useful for capturing a particular context within a wider context like an interview. And I can use them in all sorts of ways for retrieval and reporting. Again, in the first stage of IPA, they encourage you to read the transcript. It's Interpretive Phenomenological Analysis. That's Jonathan Smith, 2008-2022. He would talk about, making notes in the margins of the page if you were doing it manually, but you could also use annotations in NVivo to do the same thing. But now when you code that data out of context, the note goes with it. And when I see that piece of text in a code out of context, my note has still appeared. It's still linked at the bottom of the page. So that's annotations. And the third one is a see also link. See also links are really useful as well, because I could use these for connecting literature, policy, wider arenas to my transcript, or thinking about theory as I'm coding my transcript. So I'm going to go back up here to a literature folder. We just have one article in here in the example. I'm going to open up this article. But I can see from the pink highlighting, so that it's blue highlighting if you make an annotation. It's pink highlighting if you make a see also link. That up here I can switch on or off my annotations and or my see also links. I'm going to switch on. This is in the PDF or in the code tab. I can see this both in a code or in a document. There's my see also link, and it tells me that I've already made a connection between Barbara and this paper. So there's two types of see also link. There's a top or bottom level see also link. A top level link would link something Barbara said in her interview to an entire publication. A bottom level link would link something Barbara said to a very particular part of a paper. Now, again, I can drill down on these, but just to show you the process, if I wanted to link this abstract to Barbara's entire interview, and I can have as many see also links to as many papers off the same piece of text, and the same with annotations. I can right click on this, select the text, do links, see also link, new see also link. And I get this dialog box. I can now select. I can go to my documents, to my interviews, to Barbara. Now that connects that whole paper. That connects that abstract to Barbara's entire interview. You can see that it's linked there at the bottom. And from here, I can drill down on my. And we have a whole other video as well on working with literature. One for both setting up your literature review correctly in NVivo, and one for, because a lot of people don't set it up correctly, and one for called that we did for developers in NVivo called Accelerate Your Literature Review with NVivo. So NVivo is really useful for working in that context. But now I can see Barbara's interview. And now if I wanted to connect that abstract to a very particular part of Barbara's interview, I would select it again, I would copy it, go into Barbara, find the particular passage. I'm just going to switch those annotations out for a second. I'll switch off the highlighter as well, just to make this a bit easier to see. I think I'll turn off all the coding stripes as well. You can undock those windows completely out into their own window as well, especially useful if you have two monitors. If it gets a bit cluttered like that, but just for the purpose of the video, we're just using one monitor. But let's say this is the comment that I wanted to link it to. So I can right click here and I can paste it as a see also link. And that connects it, puts the highlighter in pink. So blue for an annotation, pink for a see also link. And now I'm connected to the paper at the bottom. So the idea is here that as I'm reading through my primary data, Barbara, I can see all the theory and theorists or policy documents that I'm hitting from this interview at the bottom of the page and the very specific comments that's hitting them. But also as I'm reading through the theory, I'm also seeing the interviews or even themes and concepts that I've linked to from the abstract. Because I could link that to a code just as easy as I could link it to Barbara's interview. Again, it could be an entire theme or it could be a very specific comment in a theme. I can link top or bottom level see also links. And they're all stored down here. All of the soft data is easily accessible and retrievable down here. There's all my memos. And I can open the item that's linked to it. I actually have one here in phase 6. I think I have that one I showed you earlier. So I can open the item, or I can open the code or the document or the memo from here. So everything is retrievable and listed out for me there. The annotations, again, I can see Barbara now has 4 because we've added one. Again, and I can drill down on any of those. And finally then, here's a list to all the connections that I've made between the primary and secondary data. And I would promote this one because I just know from working with people over 24 years now of working almost on a daily basis, exclusively with PhDs and doctoral students and academics, is that you'll be at your most creative when you're not under pressure. That's when you get the big idea. Coming back from the conference, you know. But you're always under pressure at the point where you're actually writing up, analysing and writing up. You're almost always behind a deadline. And sometimes in the heat of battle, to meet a deadline, some of those more creative ideas get washed away under the time pressures. By logging those ideas, this connection with literature, and you can see there, they take seconds to log. I can build up a bank of ideas that I can draw down on when I am under pressure. And not, I might come along 6 months from now and say, you know what, that wasn't such a big idea after all. But now I'm discounting it. I'm not overlooking it. And the richer, more important ideas are going to make it through to my discussion. Because that's going to follow. The minute I've identified those themes, I have to discuss them in the context of theory. So, see also links, annotations, and memos are the tools we looked at today. I hope you found that interesting. If you have any questions on it, if I haven't covered anything well, or you don't want to ask any conceptual or technical questions of the software, ping me an email at the address there on the screen. And if you do find the video helpful, we would appreciate if you would like and subscribe, because that pushes us up the algorithm. And until the next time, I'll see you at the next video. Take care.